How do you turn we use NIST CSF into a statement leaders and auditors actually trust? In this module, you'll use implementation tiers to measure how rigorous your program really is, and communicate that maturity in clear, defensible terms. Many organizations are technically compliant, yet still unable to withstand real attacks. That's the core problem. The CSF Core tells you what security outcomes to pursue, but that alone doesn't guarantee resilience. Implementation tiers describe how rigorously and consistently you achieve those outcomes, so your security posture is intentional and measured, not just the result of getting lucky. When you work with NIST CSF 2.0, think in two dimensions. The core functions describe the what, the outcomes you're trying to achieve. Implementation tiers describe the how well, the rigor of your governance and risk practices. Tiers aren't a grade, they're a snapshot of maturity, from partial to adaptive, that helps you communicate both your current reality and your ambition. NIST CSF 2.0 uses implementation tiers as a simple maturity ladder. At Tier 1, security is mostly ad hoc and firefighting. Tier 2 means you have defined processes, but they're uneven and not fully tied to risk. Tier 3 is where things become standardized, governed, and consistently executed. Tier 4 adds continuous improvement and adapts based on real risk data and feedback. When you apply the CSF, you'll decide where you are today and where you realistically need to be. Tier 1, partial, is basically the reactive firefighter. Work gets done, but cyber risk is handled in an ad hoc way, driven by whoever shouts the loudest. There's little connection to business objectives, so priorities constantly change. Incidents are handled one by one, with limited documentation, sharing, or learning. Supply chain and third-party risks are mostly unknown. When you assess a Tier 1 environment, expect pockets of good practice, but almost no consistency, coordination, or repeatability across the organization. Tier 2, risk-informed, is where many organizations live by default. Leadership understands cybersecurity risk and generally supports it, but practices aren't fully standardized. You might see policies drafted or approved, yet not consistently enforced across all business units. Teams share information, but mostly through informal channels and personal networks. Supply chain risks are recognized, but vendor oversight is ad hoc. The big challenge at Tier 2 is inconsistency. Outcomes depend heavily on local champions instead of organization-wide governance. Tier 3, repeatable, is where cybersecurity becomes the way we do things here. Policies are formally approved, communicated, and expected. Processes are documented, standardized, and reviewed on a regular cadence. You start to see consistent implementation across business units. And third-party and supply chain risks are handled through formal agreements and structured oversight, not just informal expectations. Tier 4, adaptive, is where cybersecurity is baked into how the organization runs. Cyber risk is considered alongside financial and operational risk in every major decision. Security becomes predictive. You use real-time data and analytics to anticipate threats, not just react. Processes constantly self-correct based on feedback, and you actively collaborate with partners and regulators in near real time. Implementation tiers are really a statement about governance maturity, not just technology strength. Moving from Tier 1 to Tier 2 means leadership explicitly approves how risk is handled. From Tier 2 to Tier 3, those decisions become formal, organization-wide policy, consistently applied. From Tier 3 to Tier 4, cybersecurity is strategically integrated into business planning, investments, and performance measures. To climb tiers, focus less on adding tools and more on strengthening mandates, policies, and decision-making structures. Not every environment needs Tier 4. Think in terms of balance. What level of rigor gives you enough risk reduction for the cost, effort, and friction it introduces? Your target tier should follow risk appetite, criticality, and budget, not ego or perfectionism. A payment gateway handling card data might justify Tier 3 or 4. An internal cafeteria menu app probably doesn't. Aim for the optimal zone, then be ready to justify it in business terms. A solid CSF assessment starts with scope. Decide exactly what you're rating: the whole enterprise, one business unit, or even a single service. Next, ground everything in evidence. Pull policies, standards, risk registers, tickets, and tool reports. If you can't point to an artifact, treat that outcome as weak or not implemented. Then, validate with people. Use interviews with IT, security, legal, and business owners to confirm how things actually work in practice. Think of the roadmap as the space between two profiles. Your current profile is an honest snapshot of how CSF outcomes are realized today. Your target profile reflects where you need to be, based on risk appetite, regulations, and business priorities. The useful part is the gap. Each difference between current and target becomes a concrete initiative, with owners, timelines, and funding. Prioritization is straightforward. Close the gaps that reduce the most risk, the fastest, with the resources you actually have. Executives don't care about firewalls or SIM rules. They care about risk, liability, and confidence that the business can hit its objectives. CSF 2.0 helps you translate technical maturity into business language, moving from ad hoc to repeatable, reducing risk and liability, and defining which gaps are consciously accepted and for how long. Imagine you're supporting a global enterprise with over 100,000 staff and highly inconsistent security practices. They choose CSF tiers as the common language. First, they assess current capabilities across regions. Next, they run a pilot in one business unit, refine the approach, then roll it out worldwide. Hitting Tier 3 isn't just a label. It forces repeatable processes and tighter IT business collaboration. To move from reactive to resilient, use implementation tiers as a management tool, not a scorecard. Measure the rigor of how you manage risk. Use the tiers to anchor governance and executive ownership. Right-size your target tier to your risk appetite and communicate maturity clearly in business language.